Welcome to today's deep dive, where we journey into the heart of a remarkable literary world. Shadows in the Wind, the sweeping four-book novel written by Rob Steyn. This is a story that doesn't just span continents and decades. It unspools the architecture of modern power, grief, ambition, and the quiet revolution of empathy in a world on the brink. Across this extended episode, our hosts guide us through the breadth and brilliance of the series, from the brutal elegance of its espionage threads to the intimate emotional currents that shape its characters' choices. They explore not only the twisting narrative itself, but also the deeper currents beneath it, the philosophies that drive the conflict, the hidden structures that steer nations, and the author's intent in crafting a world where influence whispers long before it shouts. It's a conversation about story, about humanity, and about the ways fiction can illuminate the systems that govern our real lives. So settle in, and let's step together into the shadows, and the winds that move through them.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're getting into something truly monumental.
We really are.
We are analyzing the entire political, corporate, and I'd say philosophical ecosystem that Rob Steyn built in his four-book novel, Shadows in the Wind.
It's just an incredible saga. It's a modern tragedy, a corporate thriller, but it's so much more than that. It traces the rise of this ruthless global empire.
And then its spectacular fall, and the thing that brings it down is, it's the most unlikely force you could imagine.
A scientific theory.
A theory about bonobo empathy, of all things. It's just an amazing premise.
It is. And we've gone through the whole narrative arc for this. We're talking book 1, Tenebris Ordeor, with those brutal origins.
Right. Then the corporate architecture in book 2, the violent collision, book 3.
And finally, that systemic collapse and the reveal of the real power structure in book 4. We've got it all mapped out.
And our mission for you today is, it's to distill this core philosophical battle at the heart of the entire series. We want to really get into how William Braithwaite's empire, which is built on this foundation of calculated dominance and, codified trauma.
How that empire goes head-to-head with a completely antithetical idea, Julie Capriot's tactical empathy.
Exactly. So you're going to get the entire blueprint of power, ambition, and ultimately resilience all laid bare.
What's so fascinating about the way Steyn writes this is that he uses the complexity of this global corporate thriller, almost like a Trojan horse.
To deliver what?
To deliver this really fundamental critique of Western systems. It forces you as a reader to ask a really uncomfortable question. Is dominance, is it truly the most stable evolutionary strategy for success? Or is it actually, inherently brittle?
Okay, let's unpack this right at the source then. We have to start with book 1, Tenebris Ordeor. Rob Steyn grounds William Braithwaite's origin story in something so real, so tangible.
He does. He grounds it in genuine historical trauma. And that gives the whole narrative this staggering weight from page 1.
We are talking about the historical reality of the COB evacuations.
The Children's Overseas Reception Board during World War II. And this context is absolutely vital. It wasn't just some generic evacuation story. Steyn gets very specific.
He focuses on the sinking of the passenger liner, the city of Benares.
Exactly. In September 1940, it was torpedoed, and the loss of life was just catastrophic for the children on board. 55 of the 90 Sea Orb children were lost.
And this happens right as William himself is being evacuated. So from the very beginning, his world is defined by this existential terror.
Yes, it establishes for him, as a child, that the very systems designed to protect you, your family, your government, the ship you're on, they can all fail, catastrophically, randomly.
It's the ultimate failure of trust, isn't it?
Completely. And the prose, the description of the children at the station waiting to leave, it's unforgettable. It sticks with you.
The book talks about them clutching threadbare bears.
And the cardboard tags stitched on them like cargo bound for distant shores.
Yeah.
That word, cargo, it's so deliberate.
It's dehumanizing. They aren't citizens being protected, they're items being shipped. It's this absolute loss of agency that William experiences right at the start, especially as he sees his parents, Charles and Margaret, just forced to wave goodbye.
That cargo analogy just perfectly encapsulates the psychological impact. For a young boy, the world flips. It goes from a place of, safety and predictability to one of just chaotic risk.
Where your survival depends only on how well you can adapt.
And that loss of innocence is instantly personified by the absence of his friend Gregory Talbot.
Who is lost on that ship?
He is.
If.
And Gregory becomes this ghost for William, representing all the emotional vulnerability, the childhood trust, that William decides right then and there must be jettisoned to survive.
That void of innocence, it's not left empty for long. It's immediately filled by this punishing, harsh reality of South Africa. He's displaced to a farm, Truelhoop, and put under the tutelage of Jacques de Beer.
And this is the crucible. This is where William's personality is truly forged in fire.
Jacques de Beer is. I mean, he's one of the great antagonists of William's early life.
He is, but not in a simple villainous way. He's not just cruel for cruelty's sake. His cruelty has a clear, defined purpose.
Which is what?
Jacques is a man who is just consumed by his own grief and resentment. Resentment towards the English, resentment towards anything he sees as weak, resentment toward the world that took his own stability. And he sees William. He doesn't see a child to nurture.
He sees a tool.
He sees a vessel to fill with his bitterness, his prejudice, his unyielding sense of what a man should be in this harsh country. He's programming him.
So his tutelage, his lessons, they're fundamentally philosophical. They're designed to engineer a very specific type of human.
Absolutely. And the lessons were brutal, unyielding. They were designed to turn William into something harder. Jacques taught him that control, especially emotional control, was the only currency that mattered.
And the novel gets into the specifics of this, right? The survival vocabulary.
Yes, his forced acquisition of this vocabulary. He didn't learn African first because he was curious. He learned words like spanner, milk, and most importantly, pass op, watch out, out of sheer immediate necessity.
Every word was tied to avoiding pain.
Or injury, yes. It was a language learned purely through survival, not connection or curiosity. The opposite of how a child should learn.
And Jacques' wife, Marie, she's the witness to this slow death of the child in him. The sources mention her observing William's growing stillness.
His refusal to cry. She knows that he was transforming into something else entirely. It's terrifying because you, the reader, can see that Jacques is explicitly using the boy's trauma as a foundation to build a calculating machine. He's reinforcing this idea that vulnerability is death.
And it's this perfect psychological storm, isn't it?
It is. The Sieur Yves disaster taught William that fate is random and brutal. Jacques taught him that the only countermeasure is absolute, calculated control over yourself and your circumstances.
So when the chance finally comes for him to return to England after 5 years...
Jacques gives him his final defining lesson. He warns William that the British government doesn't ask. It takes.
Reinforcing this idea that power isn't earned or given, it's fundamentally taken, it's theft.
Or at least appropriation. And William internalizes that so deeply that he refuses to go back. He makes a choice. He chooses the hardness he's acquired over the possibility of reconnecting with his past, with his family.
So what happens when he finally does return to London?
The theme of detachment just becomes palpable. He returns to this diminished, wartime London, and he immediately looks at his own parents, Charles and Margaret, with what the novel calls clinical detachment.
He doesn't see them as mother and father.
No. He sees them as actors in a situation he had successfully navigated away from and survived. He's an observer, not a participant in the family.
Which is just heartbreaking because his mother, Margaret, is already struggling with so much despair. She makes this one last desperate attempt to connect.
She asks him, "Did you even miss us at all?"
And William's response. It's the cold, defining statement of his entire new philosophy.
I adapted to my circumstances.
It's transactional. It's final. It's just completely devoid of the emotional connection she so desperately needs.
And this philosophical shift is then physically manifested by two crucial relics at the end of Book 1. You have William, found reading Machiavelli's The Prince.
A textbook on calculated strategy.
Exactly. It reinforces everything Jacques taught him, and then he has his personal talisman.
The river stone from Natal.
Precisely. And you have to understand, it's not a memento of love or some happy childhood adventure. It's the physical embodiment of his trauma being codified into a strategy.
It symbolizes his new virtues.
Pain, endurance, silence. He has replaced the entire messy, complex world of human emotion with calculated control. From this point on, William isn't looking for love or belonging. He's looking for an empire to dominate.
So William arrives at Cambridge armed with Machiavelli and this ruthless resolve. He's clearly not there for classical education. He's there to acquire assets.
Strategic assets, yes. And this brings us to the formation of what the book calls the Cambridge Coalition.
And was he looking for friends? Or is this strictly about utility?
Oh, it was absolutely about strategic utility. And this is where you see William's cold genius really begin to operate. He immediately identifies two people who have strengths he lacks, but who share his profound, uncompromising ambition.
Lyle Cunningham and Sarah Stevens?
Lyle Cunningham, the scion of old money, he has the political acumen, the established connections. He speaks the language of influence fluently. And then Sarah Stevens, whose legal intellect, her precision, and frankly, her moral flexibility were completely unparalleled.
What's so fascinating is Lyle's immediate read on William. He sees right through the academic brilliance.
He does. He notes that William is burdened by the need to be admired, which is such a keen observation. But he and William share this deep, cynical understanding of how the world really works.
They recognize what the book calls the particular loneliness of those who see too clearly and too early.
Yes. They both know the game is rigged, and they fully intend to be the ones holding the deck. Lyle sees that William is his equal in scope, even if their backgrounds are completely different.
So William brings the relentless, trauma-fueled drive.
Lyle brings the polished access, and Sarah brings the legal architecture to make their ambitions operational, to make the impossible possible.
And their conversations. They're not typical student discussions about philosophy or parties.
Not at all. They're sitting in the moonlight looking at the wreckage of the post-war world, and they're planning. William explicitly states his philosophy. He says his father, Charles, is wrong. You don't rebuild what was lost.
The future belongs to those who build something entirely new from the ruins.
That's the line. They believe the old systems of, politesse, of inherited hierarchy, are fundamentally weak and broken. They see the ruins and decide they're going to build a new structure of power that's entirely self-made, relentless, and crucially invisible.
And this shared vision solidifies into what they call the triumvirate's covenant.
Which is not a formal business contract. And that distinction is highly significant. It goes back to William's foundational belief, which he states later in Book 3. Empires aren't inherited, they're taken.
So why a covenant instead of a legally binding document? What does that say about William's idea of trust?
It tells you everything. William, who was betrayed by the arbitrary chaos of fate, trusts only two things: mutual ambition and mutual vulnerability.
A contract can be broken by lawyers.
Exactly. But a covenant, as the book says, a private agreement, not legally binding, but a covenant nonetheless, signed on just 3 signature lines, that relies on the shared ethical bond of ruthless ambition.
If one of them betrays the others, the whole thing collapses.
So their loyalty isn't about feeling. It's about pragmatic, interconnected survival. They are building something that will outlast us. And that something is the WBO, the William Braithwaite organization.
The narrative then jumps forward pretty quickly, and we see William applying these cold, calculated lessons to his own family. It culminates in that corporate takeover.
The displacement of his own father, Charles, and his uncles, Duncan and Edward, in Book 3, is just a spectacular piece of corporate maneuvering.
It shows his total mastery of that layered shadow architecture they planned at Cambridge. He doesn't just convince the board.
No, he uses leverage that is impossible to refuse. The detail that just sticks with you, the one that shows you exactly who he is now, is how he secures that one crucial board vote, the one for Mrs. Richardson.
Right, tell us about that leverage. It's so surgical.
It is. He doesn't go after it directly. He's done his homework. He knows the granular details of every share, every board member's personal vulnerabilities. He discovers Mrs. Richardson's son has massive gambling debts.
And the debts aren't held by a normal bank.
No, they're discreetly held by a subsidiary of one of William's own convoluted shell companies. It's this act of deep surgical precision. He's using the layered power structure they designed, the WBO, to exploit a private family tragedy for corporate gain.
He weaponizes information. He weaponizes debt. The climax of that scene, when he's standing in Charles Braithwaite's own chair at the head of the table, he's effectively executed a coup against his own blood. The tension must have been suffocating.
The tension is immense. And Charles, completely shattered, finally grasps the true scope of William's detachment. He finally understands where it all came from.
And his realization is just this tragic summation of their entire relationship. It's a moment of terrible self-blame.
He says, "You taught me too well, it seems. You taught me that power is taken, not given." William simply learned the lesson of the war, the lesson of Jacques de Beer, and applied it to the highest levels of global commerce. The WBO is now fully formed, and it's casting a shadow across the globe.
Okay, so we've firmly established William's foundation: dominance, calculation, global extraction. But running parallel to this, throughout Book 2, Steyn starts to build this deeply philosophical counter-narrative.
He does, and he introduces us to Dr. Julie Capriot, whose work is built on the exact opposite principles of William's entire empire.
Her work is the moral and intellectual antithesis to the WBO. She's a brilliant zoologist from Oxford.
Working in the Congo, at the Bongo Koshu Bonobo Sanctuary, her research is groundbreaking, and it focuses on this concept she calls tactical empathy.
And this is where the novel really elevates itself, isn't it? It starts delivering these profound ideas wrapped in this engaging thriller narrative.
Absolutely.
So what exactly is tactical empathy, and why is it so philosophically disruptive to the world William has built?
Well, Julie's core concept is transformative. She argues that empathy, which William would absolutely see as a weakness, is not a mere passive emotional response.
It's a strategy.
It's a deliberate strategic mechanism for group cohesion and, most importantly, for long-term survival. She observed that bonobo societies, our closest relatives, evolve these highly resilient matriarchal structures not through a dominance hierarchy, not through force.
But through what?
Through conflict softening, shared resource distribution, and the strategic use of connection to build trust.
So she's arguing that connection, far from being soft, is actually the ultimate long-term strategic advantage.
Precisely. She argues that true resilience is, and this is a quote, grown in the space made safe by others. Now, contrast that directly with William's model. His empire is built on zero-sum gain, short-term extraction, and the constant gnawing fear of betrayal.
Julie's work, then, implicitly suggests that systems built solely on force, like the WBO, are ultimately what she calls evolutionarily unstable.
Exactly. They carry too much internal tension. They require too much energy to maintain through constant enforcement, whereas systems built on robust connection can absorb shocks, they can adapt, they can endure.
This just elevates the novel so far beyond a simple corporate thriller. It becomes a fundamental critique of the whole Western paradigm that views power as hierarchical and inherently extractive.
It does. And her partner, Jamie Soper, he later crystallizes this perfectly. He asks why human societies so consistently regard dominance over connection when the long-term evidence from our closest cousins suggests the reverse is more successful.
So you have this perfect opposition setup. William believes the future belongs to those who take everything.
And Julie believes the future belongs to those who build robust systems of mutual reliance. One is a fragile, force-dependent tower. The other is a decentralized network system that can absorb massive damage.
The narrative then begins to carefully set the stage for the inevitable collision of these two worlds. We meet Jamie Soper, her scientific partner, and then we get introduced to this really complex character.
The operative Frankie, or Nastya Michenko.
Right, who finds her way into the orbit of Viator Junter and the secretive Civil Cooperation Bureau, the CCB, in South Africa.
Frankie's transformation is a brilliant and much smaller scale, parallel to William's. William weaponized his trauma to gain power. Frankie learns to weaponize her own vulnerability.
She grew up on the difficult streets of Kyiv, and she realized early on that her presence, her beauty, could be a dangerous kind of currency.
Yes. Her handler, a man named Gurko, he saw her as an asset to be used. But Nastya has this profound self-awareness to realize she can weaponize it instead. She can take control of how she's perceived.
She chooses to calculate and manipulate her way out of victimhood rather than just endure it. So how does she connect to William's world?
She transforms herself into Francine Matherson Frankie. She uses her calculated observational skills to get a position of access and influence through this man, Viator Junter, who is a known field agent for the CCB.
And the CCB, the Civil Cooperation Bureau, what are they?
They're a shadowy deep state intelligence structure. They're often associated with high-level covert operations, resource acquisition, and they frequently cross paths with groups like Panazanian Mining, which we later learn is a WBO front.
So her training, her ability to read intentions and control situations, she's essentially a perfectly trained asset. She's operating independently, but she's strategically aligned with the power structures William serves.
She is. She's a small, precise weapon being prepped in the shadows, ready to collide with this massive Braithwaite empire, even if she doesn't know her ultimate target yet.
It's the ultimate contrast, then. You have William, the massive visible structure of dominance, relying on brute force and corporate layers.
You have Julie, the invisible force of an idea, relying on connection.
And Frankie, the calculated human intelligence, just waiting for the right moment to strike.
And these two philosophies, these two paths, they are set to collide violently in Book 3, the Bongo Koshia Sanctuary, the very heart of Julie's research.
Is revealed to be the target for resource extraction.
Yes. The economic motive is coltan, a strategic mineral essential for all our modern electronics, and it's referred to in the corporate documents with this chillingly sterile code name, Package Z.
And this is the point where William's ambition, the need for continuous resource extraction to fuel WBO's growth, is placed in direct and fatal opposition to Julie's sanctuary of ideas and conservation.
This kind of operation, it demands a terrifying combination of high-level corporate strategy and brutal subcontracted force.
Let's talk about this operational team. It's a key part of the novel's critique of corporate evil.
It's a tiered system designed for moral distance. At the very top, the strategic level, you have Peter Cronbrough from Cronbrough Fisk Strategies, or CFS. He's William's right-hand man for crisis management and black ops. He's orchestrating the schedule, ensuring total legal insulation.
Then you have Panazanian Mining Corps as the visible, legitimate front.
And then the dirty work.
Yeah.
The actual violence required on the ground, that falls to Colonel Moise Kasongo.
Kasongo is the personification of just unchecked, outsourced brutality.
He is. And there's a moment where Victoria Chamberlain, a key executive at Cronbrough Fisk, she voices genuine unease about relying on him. She knows his reputation for human rights violations will require, as she puts it, significant diplomatic maneuvering to suppress if anything goes wrong.
So they know who he is. And that reliance on this known brutal quantity is the first major structural vulnerability in William's calculated control. He's outsourcing the violence, but he can't outsource the moral risk.
And the ultimate tragedy unfolds. It's all captured by these remote camera traps set up for research. Julie Capriot is executed.
And the description of her last stand, it's not about physical resistance, is it? It's about philosophical defiance.
Her martyrdom is pivotal to the whole story. The description notes that she did not kneel. She maintained her dignity. She focused her eyes directly on Kasongo's face, refusing to look away, even as she was assaulted and killed.
The text says her spirit retreats, focusing on nothing. It's an act of emotional transcendence in the face of the ultimate violation.
It is. This is the moment the idea becomes more powerful than the person. Her physical death is the birth of the ideological weapon that will bring them all down.
And the corporate response is terrifying in its speed and organization. It's not reactive damage control.
No, it's a pre-planned containment strategy, orchestrated by the CFS crisis team.
Victoria Chamberlain and Martin Holloway, they move instantly to frame Jamie Soper.
Exactly. And they understand a key principle of modern information warfare. You don't fight a narrative by denying it. You fight it by creating a more compelling, manufactured reality. The goal isn't just to hide WBO's involvement.
It's to utterly destroy the credibility of the only surviving witness and the main advocate for Julie's work.
And the brilliance of this part of the novel is how it details the mechanism of this evidence weaponization. They create an entire alternate reality using fabricated evidence from a program called Hijackers.
What made this fabricated evidence so compelling, but also ultimately so flawed?
It was compelling because of its precision, almost to the point of absurdity. It suggested an overwhelming volume of data that all pointed to Jamie's guilt. The prosecution's case relies entirely on this fabricated metadata that could have been generated during a reconstruction process.
And the key detail is the timestamps.
The identical file access and modification timestamps down to the second across 42 separate documents.
Why 42 documents? What's the significance of that number?
It's the sheer scale of it. 42 documents suggests an industrial scale preparation. It's not just a couple of forged memos, but those identical timestamps across so many files? That's the smoking gun for fabrication.
No natural system works that way.
No. No matter how carefully managed, you don't get those perfectly synchronous timestamps without reconstruction or critically automated forgery. There's a junior solicitor, Michael Reeves, who spots the absence of contemporaneous system records, but the narrative is designed to be overwhelming. They want to convict Jamie on plausibility dressed as certainty.
And this is where the human element, the unpredictable factor, breaks through William's perfect architecture of dominance.
Elise Delacroix, the skeptical journalist. She's the critical observer who starts pulling at all the right threads.
She gets these anonymous leaks, a USB drive, a cryptic warning from the matriarch.
And later, crucial help from a source named Kayambi. Her journalistic instinct just screams that something is fundamentally wrong here. And her key moment of breakthrough is when she realizes the media response and the legal case against Jamie.
Yeah.
They weren't reactive. They weren't damage control. They were entirely prepared.
She deduces that this immense, coordinated, preemptive effort means they must be trying to insulate something very large.
Exactly. It's not just about covering up a murder. It's about protecting the entire system that enabled the murder in the first place. She realizes that the people who saw that raw footage of the atrocity said nothing and just proceeded with the plan. That coldness is what convinces her.
And her decision to pursue this story leads her directly into the path of that deeper shadow, the Concordat. Even though she doesn't know it yet, she is the catalyst. She transforms Julie's intellectual critique into actionable global exposure.
And that collapse of William Braithwaite's empire, it doesn't start with a legal ruling or a stock market crash. It starts with the pure, unadulterated exposure of truth.
Elise Delacroix makes the moral choice. Despite massive legal threats and personal risk, she decides to publish the raw camera trap footage of Kasongo's actions.
And this is the moment William's entire philosophy of detachment meets its reckoning. He built a structure designed to keep the brutal machinery of extraction completely separate from the polite face of the boardroom.
When Elise publishes that footage,
The corporate shadows are suddenly, uncomfortably made flesh. The world sees the direct, undeniable consequence of WBO's operational decisions.
the global reaction is immediate. It's visceral. And this is where the novel uses modern media dynamics so perfectly. The stock market reacts instantly.
Panazanian stock plummets 15%. You see universal condemnation, emergency UN Security Council meetings, wire services are running the story globally. The whole veil of polite corporate fictions is just shredded in an instant.
That USB drive is the cornerstone of it all. Elise understands the sheer volume of evidence now available, plus the moral outrage, is enough to trigger criminal investigations that can dismantle WBO layer by layer.
And this is the key. The power of William's dominance was centralized. It was traceable, if you dug deep enough. The power of the exposure, fueled by decentralized digital platforms, proves to be the ultimate destabilizing vulnerability he never accounted for.
And at the same time, we see the redemption of Jamie Soper. His lawyer, Alexander Roth, is just phenomenal in her defense. She basically leverages William's own strategy against him.
Roth is the legal intellect that is a perfect match for Sarah Stevens. She expertly attacks the manufactured evidence. She points out that the identical mass-produced timestamps across 42 documents, they don't prove guilt, they prove forgery.
The corporate effort to create a perfect reality is what ultimately undoes their own case.
And crucially, Janie's defense is funded anonymously by Dominic Avery, a figure with deep ties to the mining industry, but someone who is clearly working against William's reckless methods. Jamie is exonerated without a stain on your character.
And that freedom gives him this powerful new purpose. He's going to carry Julie's ideas forward.
He takes Julie's academic work, tactical empathy, and he transforms it into this profound public message. He starts speaking at influential venues, the Royal Society. He's not just mourning anymore, he's advocating.
He presents the core critique of WBO's failure. That line, systems built on force eventually collapse.
True leadership ensures that there is a future and that the future is worth living in.
He essentially weaponizes the counter-philosophy. He's using the bonobo research to challenge the evolutionary stability of dominance itself, forcing these powerful audiences to question the basic assumptions of their leadership models.
The empire built on exclusion is being dismantled by a movement built on inclusion and resilient connection. The two philosophies simply cannot coexist.
And while the idea takes flight, the architect of dominance meets his physical end. William Braithwaite's collapse is swift and final.
He's poisoned during a private dinner with his two closest allies, Sarah and Lyle.
That specific detail, poison during a trusted dinner, is just loaded with pathos, with irony. And his final thoughts, which the novel really dwells on, they're not of his collapsing empire, or his money, or even the allies who likely orchestrated his demise.
No, they drift back to Gregory Talbot, the boy on the ship deck.
It's the ultimate return to his lost innocence, isn't it?
It is. In his final moments, William's mind returns to the trauma that defined his entire life's trajectory. The moment of profound, uncontrollable vulnerability. His reign ends not with a defiant roar, but with his silent, desperate surrender to memory.
The man who dedicated his life to controlling every circumstance is taken out silently, efficiently, and privately.
And the machine survives. Sarah Braithwaite and Lyle Cunningham issue these immediate joint statements about organizational renewal. They position themselves as the responsible executives cleaning up the mess. They prove that the WBO, though it's been shaken, is structurally sound enough to jettison its architect and just continue operating, albeit under a slightly cleaner veneer.
And now we get to the real meta-critique of the novel, the final act, where we realize that William Braithwaite, This man who believed himself to be the ultimate architect of dominance
Was merely a subordinate, a high-level manager acting under the direction of a deeper, colder, and far more powerful structure. The Concordat, unnamed.
This structure is the true shadow in the wind. It's referenced by these powerful, shadowy figures like Evner Schenker, and it's physically embodied by the elderly matriarch, Lady Aldbrough.
They exist on a plane above nation-states and corporations. Their symbol tells the entire story.
The three interlocked circles.
Unadorned and perfectly balanced. It signifies absolute, enduring stability. It prioritizes balance and continuity over spectacle. William built an empire that was meant to be seen and admired. The Concordat operates on a principle of absolute invisibility.
They exist not within systems, but in the shadows of their architects.
William's tragedy is that he internalized all the lessons of dominance, but he never understood the lessons of enduring power. True power, according to the Concordat, is felt, not seen.
And this is precisely why he was removed. He violated their most sacred rule.
The prohibition against recklessness that threatened exposure. His actions at Bongo Kosh, his reliance on a loose cannon like Kasongo, his entire arrogant conduct. It all led to an inconvenient exposure of a system that had functioned smoothly for decades.
William made the shadow visible. He prioritized his short-term ambition over the long-term stability of the deep state.
There's a chilling detail in Book 4 about the matriarch. After she gets the report about Bongo Kosha, she sees William's name circled in red ink on some corporate acquisition report. And she just calmly dials him on an antique Bakelite phone.
The contrast between the antique phone and the modern corporate betrayal is perfect.
And her voice, described as soft but carrying the weight of mountains, asks the one defining question that seals his fate. William, do you understand what you've done?
He didn't. He didn't understand that he had created a vulnerability that threatened the Concordat's primary asset, their invisibility.
And Peter Crombrough, William's own crisis strategist, he gets his own summons. And he has this moment of profound, terrible clarity. He realizes his asymmetry had been inverted.
Someone knew his operations, his vulnerabilities, his sins better than he knew theirs.
The master of manipulation had been outmanipulated by a quiet, calculating force he never even saw coming.
Which brings us to the final and most provocative ambiguity of the entire novel. We know Elise and Jamie received critical help.
The raw footage, the Geneva archive, that mysterious call from Kayambi, all the pieces they needed to dismantle WBO.
So the question is, did Julie Capriot's theory of tactical empathy succeed because it was inherently superior and evolutionarily sound?
Or did it succeed because a deeper, colder power, the Concordat, chose to deploy it as a tool against a subordinate who became too visible and too messy?
The novel refuses to give a simple answer.
And that's its genius. The Concordat may have facilitated the downfall of the WBO simply to reset the board, to install Sarah and Lyle, who understand the rules, and to reaffirm the prime directive of invisibility.
They essentially leveraged the disruptive power of empathy to neutralize the inconvenient visibility of dominance.
Which is a chilling thought. The most enduring structures, like the Concordat, are built through calculated, silent connection, which, in a way, reinforces the pragmatic truth behind Julie's ideas, even if the Concordat's motives are entirely cynical.
It suggests that the idea of resilience through connection is so powerful that even the architects of the deepest shadow recognize its strategic value when it's deployed correctly. It's a terrifying validation of her research.
Shadows in the Wind is truly a masterwork because it provides this complete cycle of power. We see the origin of William's philosophy, power is taken, forged in trauma and detachment, and we see it pitted directly against Julie's counter-philosophy. Resilience is grown in the space made safe by others.
The novel doesn't just critique corporate corruption, it critiques the very fundamental evolutionary stability of dominance itself. William built a spectacular empire, yes, but it was brittle. It relied on systems that demanded constant conflict and, ultimately, sacrifice.
And the ideas of the martyred scientist, Julie, they survived her physical removal. They became a profoundly disruptive force against the architects of silence. The core takeaway here is that ideas, once they're unleashed, they cannot be contained.
The corporate structure tried to silence her by removing her, then by framing her partner. But her theory became the very language of the opposition. It was carried forward by Jamie Soper and articulated to the world by Elise Delacroix.
The idea of tactical empathy proved to be more stable, more enduring than the billions of dollars that William Braithwaite commanded.
The book ends with that incredible line acknowledging that true power moves through the world like wind through trees, felt rather than seen. It challenges all of us to look beyond the visible hierarchies, the boardrooms, the titles, the money, and to look at the underlying structures of influence, whether they're built on force or built on genuine pragmatic connection.
Which leaves you with this final provocative thought to consider.
Hmm.
If strength truly lies in connection and shared vision, and if systems built on force do eventually collapse, are we in our own global systems building structures that reflect that truth and that resilience? Or are we simply waiting for the next unavoidable exposure that forces the hand of the deeper unseen architects?
Thank you for taking this deep dive with us today. We'll see you next time.